Hi everyone, Kaylie Shapiro here, back on another episode of Right or Wrong on the NYRA Bets YouTube. This week, I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud, but our good friend Nick Zito and my co-host somehow managed to get Shug McGaughey to show up to the Hall of Fame and sit down with us for an hour today. So Matthew is a big fan of Shug McGaughey and I really wanted him to do this interview today. I'm gonna pass it over to them now and I hope everybody enjoys.
Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and really honored and privileged to be sitting between two absolute legends in this game, trainer Shug McGaughey, trainer Nick Zito, and taking over for my esteemed colleague Kaylie Shapiro on this episode of the Right or Wrong podcast. But Shug, just wanted to say thank you again for coming and agreeing to talk with us for a little while here in the Horse Racing Hall of Fame. Always a lot of fun to be in this setting around the legendary figures in the sport. And I wanted to ask you maybe a question to get things started off. You have influenced generations of trainers. I'm interested though, who were your early influences when you were either growing up or getting into the game?
Well, I started out working for a guy named David Whiteley that had basically some cheap horses around Keeneland, and we went to Chicago, and then we'd go to Libertyville, and then I kind of ran through that. I worked for a guy named Jimmy Cowden. His family owned a farm in Kentucky, and he trained and had a bigger stable, a little more substance to it. And from there, I went to work for a guy named John Fulton, and he was training for George Steinbrenner at the time. And we were there for about a year or so, and then we went up to a minor league baseball game. Mr. Steinbrenner was looking for a trainer to go to his farm in Ocala, so I went. I wasn't ready to go, but I went. And so that was I stayed there for about 6 months, and then we went on to Keeneland, and at that time he was ruled off for illegal campaign contributions. He was given both sides, and so we had to go out to the Kentucky Training Center. So that was I had those horses out there on my own. And then from there, I went to work for Frank and David Whiteley, and they were the big influence. And everything I did, we had really nice horses at the time for a lot of really influential people, and I was there for 6 or 7 years, and we would be Belmont Park and Camden, and went to Hialeah 1 year with David Whiteley, and then went to Santa Anita with David, and that's where that was the winter of 78, 79, and I had some friends that came out there to see clients really in Santa Anita, but they were friends of mine from Kentucky. And they had a client in San Antonio, Texas, not San Antonio, Abilene, Texas.
Oh, okay.
Worse. And I started working for them.
Okay.
But the biggest influence of the whole thing was Whiteley's.
Nick, you said something last week on the podcast that you said Mary Lou almost got upset with you about it. You said great horses train themselves.
Yeah.
And you said you can ask anybody that. Great horses train themselves. And so you said you can ask Shug that. So I'm going to ask you, do great horses train themselves? Because you've had a lot of them.
I tell you, they help you a lot. I agree with Nick. They help you a lot. It's not that easy. You can't take a horse that can't run and make him run. But training a good one, you just got to learn how to really kind of manage them and watch them. You watch them all, but you just kind of watch them maybe a little closer. And so I do agree with Nick. I think that they make it a lot easier.
Yeah. Nick, one of the things the two of you have in common is an association with legendary names in this sport. Obviously, with Mr. McGaughey, the Ogden Phipps, and with you, Mary Lou Whitney. Nick, I'd start with you. What was it like to have that partnership with one entity in that regard, and kind of how special is that to have that kind of partnership with, in your case, Mary Lou?
Well, they're from a place where they're taught at a very young age. The trainer is the trainer, the owner is the owner. And we used to have badges when we were kids. be owner, gentleman, trainer, whoever else then, jockey, and then whatever. And today, there's not many, and I don't mean this in disrespect, but there's a few. I was privileged, I know Shug, I'm not putting words in his mouth, but he was privileged to work for people like that, because you become like friends. That's number one. It's a business. You work for them, but you don't have to worry about training the horse. And I've watched Shug over the years, and most people know. I'm a big fan because when he came to New York, I'll tell you a fast story about
Yeah, please.
So there was a jockey agent named Fats Weissman. Remember him, Shug?
Sure.
And he would bring Shug a program. And we always say to this guy, Shug. I always want to, because it's a cool name, Shug. And you hear it around the racetrack, Shug this, Shug that. But his style of training horses, and to get back to your question, in my opinion, I was glad I worked for the Whitneys. I was glad I worked for people.
Yeah.
Tracy Farmer, George, believe it or not, this time, they would let you train that horse. I don't think you could do it any other way. And I mean, in the right way.
Yeah.
You're good. And I know Shug, he's like a general. I tell you what, if you want to see a treat, you come to Oklahoma, before his horses go to the track, all of them are walking around, and he's telling each rider, not by, list, you do this, you do this, you do that, you backtrack, you do this, you do that. That's horsemanship. But he also has, you could see, he demands respect, but he commands respect. And, he's in the Hall of Fame. He's a legendary trainer. He's one of the top ever.
Yeah.
But I think you need to work for those kind of people. You got to ask Shug.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you with the Phipps family, what did that partnership mean to you, and kind of what is it like to have that sort of long-term partnership with a family like that?
Well, just as Nick said, I mean, they left me alone.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could have ever trained for anybody that didn't leave me alone, because I might get a little confused at that. But they were very good about that. They cared immensely about their horses and their stable, and they enjoyed it. Mr. Phipps, 5 days a week would come to the barn in Belmont, 7 days a week in Saratoga, and Denny 7 days a week at Saratoga, not as much at Belmont, because he was going to the city to work. But it was quite an experience. I mean, not only with the horses, but with the life too. I mean, I was a little guy from Kentucky. This Dick was a little guy from New York, and to be around people like this and to be able to learn not only about horses and horsemanship, but etiquette and how to really conduct yourself in situations, where the horse came first, and when you got into positions where you had a decent horse, that you knew how to handle them, but also knew how to handle yourself. And that was one of the things that I always really kind of prided myself in, was trying to handle myself in the best possible light I could, and they would allow that to happen. But the one thing about training for the Phippses for that many years, they basically gave me my life. Now that I'm older, I can even look back and think maybe where I did make some mistakes here or there, but the only time I ever remember ever saying anything about me making a mistake, I ran personal Ensign in the Beldame. I think Lucas had 3 in there, and she was a 3-year-old, and instead of running her in Spencer, which would have been the next day at Keeneland, then he called me on the phone the next day and he said, "You didn't, but I thought you made a mistake running her in Beldame instead of the Spencer." That was probably the only time that I ever heard him ever say, "I thought maybe you made a mistake," and that was a bit tongue-in-cheek. And they, as Nick said, those people understood. It's different now that these people, they understood. If you got beat, you got beat. If you won, you won. They knew you weren't going to win up 50% of the time. It wasn't going to happen. And you know, they really enjoyed their homebreds, and that made me enjoy them that much more. And then when we got some decent horses, then, you know, we had some homebred offspring, and that made it a lot of fun too. But they were, you know, to me, they were wonderful, wonderful people, and like I said, they pretty much made my life.
Absolutely incredible partnership, obviously, over the years. You mentioned the specialness of the homebreds, and obviously one of the great accomplishments is the trio of Personal Ensign, My Flag, and Storm Flag Flying, winning those Breeders' Cups for you, and each of those having just incredible legacies. And I'm curious, kind of what was it like, just to follow up on that question, to train a family in that regard, and to see new generations come along, and you know, whether or not there were those similarities that you saw between, or maybe each one of them was their own horse in their own unique way.
Well, the one thing about it is they can all run. That's what, that helped a lot. That whole family, you know, they were all good, and then their offspring. You know, Personal Ensign was a great broodmare. They were similar in some ways and dissimilar in the others. You know, I mean, when Personal Ensign came around, had a girl, a galloper named Jean, and she kept telling me, said, you know, how good she is. I said, Jean, she goes a half and 50. She said, yeah, but she goes a half and 50 like no other horse goes a half and 50. And, you know, then it started just, once we got her to the races, it just started possession, you know, going ahead. And then she got hurt. I breezed her to go to the Breeders' Cup, and she breezed like, you know, really no other horse I'd ever had. Not fast, but just the way she did it. Yeah. Came back, and she cracked her back past her. You know, we were just trying to get her back to be a broodmare, and, you know, both Dr. Reed and Dr. Bramlage both said, she'll make it back. So Dr. Bramlage told me, said, if she hurts something, it ain't gonna be that late. And then, of course, she went on, had the career that she had, and went in the Breeders' Cup. And then My Flag came along, and she was great, big, strong filly by Easy Goer, and we were talking about her tomorrow the other day. She, you know, when she was a 2-year-old, you know, she'd be just walking around and she'd just run into the wall and this and that. She was tough, and you know, we never could like saddle her in the saddle. We'll saddle her in the saddling stall, but we didn't take her out on the walking ring. She went straight to the track, and you know, so third win in the Breeders' Cup when she was 2, and won the coaching club when she was 3. Was third in the Belmont when she was 3, and then have Storm Flag Flying come along, and she had some traits of her mother. She was a little bit tough to handle for a while, and you know, but once you get used to them. And I remember I was home sick one day when she was a 2-year-old, and the girl at Galloper called me on the phone and said, I don't think I can get on her anymore. I don't think I can. So I called my assistant, Buzzy. I said, Buzzy, I said, what happened? And he said, well, she froze with her and scared her, you know. So I can remember I was telling them when I would train her, I would just walk up and down that tarmac, or go up to this 3rd floor and walk up and down that thing because I was a nervous wreck. What she might do? I made a mistake. When she ran in the Breeders' Cup, I took her to Chicago early, and I trained her in the dark because I was afraid what she might do. Yeah. And then when she ran, Johnny came back and she got headed late in the race. And Johnny said, I'm glad that happened, because since she was just looking at everything. Oh, wow. The signs and the people and this and that. And so he said that kind of put her back in the game, and she was able to go on and win. And then brought her back to the 3-year-old. She had a few little problems, but you know, she overcame some of them. It was okay.
It's incredible, and obviously you mentioned Easy Goer being the sire of My Flag, but then Nick, you had an up close. You were telling me this last night. You had an up close and personal view of Easy Goer in his very first race, because you had a horse entered in that same race.
Shug actually knew. Shug actually knew one of my owners. His name was B. Giles Brophy. Controversial gentleman, you know, gave us a chance, and So I'm running a horse called, at the time, this is before Strike the Gold, same people, but Magic Eagle. So it's Saratoga. So Magic Eagle's, you know, he's working like crazy. So he's on the lead, whatever, and here comes Easy Goer, you know, right by him, you know, this and that. So I've been on a racetrack since I'm 16. So he's all, you know, really disappointed. I said, hey, even though he just broke his mane, you just saw something great. So I've been a fan, Shug knows, of Easy Goer forever. And now that you gave me the opportunity to talk about Easy Goer, there's the master trainer. But when you have a 3-year-old, kids go to college, they're freshmen in college, then they're 90 pounds, 5'2", then they become a junior, and it's, you know, they get to 200 pounds and 5'8", 6 feet. Easy Goer, when he won the Whitney, and then came back and he won the Travers, forget all these races he won in New York were, you know, were incredible. You know, years ago they used to have a really great program. Shug, was it the Bay Show you started him out, the 7/8 mile? Which race was that? Was that the
3-year-old?
Yes, sir.
Started out the swale.
And the Swell, and then he went
Then
to
the
New York.
Gotham.
Then the Gotham was a mile. And
Then
the way
the
he,
Wood, and then-
yeah, in other words, he was ready for college when he went to school. You know what I mean? He was like the Kobe Bryants or whoever they are. They don't need to go to college. You know, they just go into the NBA or whatever it is. But winning the Whitney, to me, as a 3-year-old, and then coming back, you know, the Travers was whatever. And if you watch Shug train, when he came to New York, I watched him. I told him a couple million times. I just loved the way he trained the horses. And if you can believe it, did I love his boss, Frank Wiley, David Whiteley? They were tremendous trainers. I love Alan Jerk. But I watched him train. There's a special way that he trains. And here's one of the things, Matthew. I told Danny the other day, Gargan, I think he worked at, I don't know, whatever it is. I said, Danny, remember, there's only a few trainers can train a horse to go a distance of ground, and don't lose that fact. And Shug is at the top of the top. There's nobody better than training a horse for a distance of ground than that fella right there. Nobody.
When the idea to run Easy Goer against older competition in the Whitney, when did that kind of come to fruition? Was that always kind of in the back of your mind potentially with him, or I'm just
It wasn't
curious?
in the back of my mind, but after the Belmont, I had a horse called, had another horse running, Jim Dandy. And so Mr. Phipps was kind of anxious maybe to try him in the Whitney, and I didn't have any problem with it. And, so, you know, that's what we did. It wasn't like he had been beaten, so it wasn't like, you know, those pick spots where he ain't gonna get beat. But, so, you know, if he lost, he lost. And, I mean, that's not the way I think about it, but that's the way it is. And, so that was kind of, you know, and it was a good space between the Whitney and the Travers. You know, the Travers was really on our mind, and to try to win it, but to be, you know, the Whitney stood on its own, as Nick said. It's a great race, and comes at a great time of the year, going that distance. You know, the first part of August, kind of, but a lot of those races are gone by the wayside, and are not as important as they used to be, but the Whitney still is very important, and you know, in anybody's mind. And as Nick, well, I've been lucky to win it a time or two, and Nick has, and you know, it still means a lot to me. I mean, I wish I had one competing in it coming up. I don't, but you know, maybe one of these days we'll have that opportunity again. But so, you know, that was a little bit of our idea, was the prestige of the race and the timing, and Mr. Phipps sort of kind of wanted, without saying, to run in there, and so that's where it all kind of came from. But a funny part of that story, I'm asking, when I was getting ready to run as a 3-year-old with Gulfstream, I remember coming back to the bar one day, it was in February, and I told Buzzy, my assistant at the time, I said, this horse getting ahead of me a little bit, you know, but he was so athletic, you know, that he was doing things so easy, and so I kind of just backed down a little bit, and then, you know, I knew where I was going to run him in a swale, and if all went well, then we were going to come to the Gotham and then onto the Wood and hopefully onto the Derby. I mean, these guys now, they want to run them once or twice, but, I remember Seth Hancock telling me one time, I asked him about a filly, and I said, should I retire or run her? He said, they're made for a running show. and that's the truth. You can't overdo it, but they are ready to go. I mean, in the Gotham, we ran a 5th or 2nd off the world record, but, it just wasn't his day at the Derby, but, the Preakness came up and it was a great race. And, people were asking me, were you disappointed? I said, yeah, I was disappointed he lost, but I wasn't disappointed in the race. I mean, he ran his eyeballs out that day. Pat Day, and I would never say this, never did say it, till after he retired, was he came back to the Preakness barn. We went in a little room they give you there, and he goes, I got him beat. And whether he did or he didn't, but it was, it was a great race. It'll go down the annals as a great race.
One of the best ever. That Preakness got to be one of the best ever.
When we got back to Belmont, I felt like maybe I had a little bit of an edge because he loved that big track. And, everything didn't go right for Easy Goer. For Sunday Silence, he grabbed his quarter and he kicked Whittingham in the head. And just, not that that's going to take away from his performance, but you sure like to have everything go right. And if something doesn't go right, you always kind of think, but, and everything went right for us. And it was able to win easy.
We've seen that sort of this year of rivalry between sovereignty and journalism. We've seen journalism kind of come up just short against sovereignty in 2 of the 3 legs of the Triple Crown. And you kind of touched on it a little bit just now when you said you had a feeling that Easy Goer was going to like Big Sandy, going to like Belmont. And so did that give you the confidence to go, yeah, we can turn the tables?
Well, yeah, I did feel like we could turn the tables.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of a game plan in my head that I wanted to discuss with Pat Day, which I did that morning, and that was just kind of how I thought maybe we needed to let him run. Let Sunday Silence go, and then come, and and he was able to pick him up pretty quick, pretty easy. So I did go into the race with a lot of confidence, but he beat us 2 out of 3 times, so we're gonna have to prove it. And
Sure.
he did prove it that day.
Now, I wanted to go back to something with personal ensign, and you talked about it again just a moment ago in terms of picking a spot where a horse can win. Obviously, personal ensign ends her career perfect 13-0. Or was there a point at which you start getting nervous about this unbeaten streak? Is it like a no-hitter in baseball where nobody wants to talk about it and you just kind of, go about your daily routine as best you can? Or, how conscious were you of this unbeaten streak and, going into that final race in the Breeders' Cup against Winning Colors? Again, one of the great races of all time.
Obviously, the tension built up as the more we went, but, we came back from being hurt, and I didn't know what the situation was. I knew she was training really well, and I couldn't get the race to go forward up here, and so I couldn't get it to go down there. I ended up running her out of conditions, a 3 other than instead of a 2 other than. I was playing golf with Tommy Skiffington after that race, and he said, "Boy, I'm glad to get you out of the way." I never said a word.
That's funny.
He was back in there. She really ran big that day.
That was funny.
I think, when it got down, I remember when she ran in the Beldame as a 4-year-old. I said to myself, Shug, if she breaks good, sit down and watch her run. Because I never had I'd watched her, but it had always been pins and needles. And about picking out spots is, I was going to run her in the Ruffian, and when she came as a 4-year-old, and I kind of got to reading up condition books and this and that. I said, well, she's going to get in with 3 or 4 lighter pounds than she would in the Ruffian, but I didn't really have an idea of Winning Colors was going to be in there at the time, and so I picked out my spot, and that was what it was going to be, no matter who was in it. And then, so I decided I was going to run a wrap. I had a filly that won the ballerina here that that same summer, and named Cadillac. And so I'm gonna run her. Cadero's gonna ride her, because Randy was riding personal Ensign. So come in the paddock for about the third or fourth race. And Cadero comes up to me and this was probably Cadero more than anything else, but he said, "Lucas is livid you're gonna run that filly in there." I said, "Why?" He said, "He's livid." I said, "Okay, I'll scratch her." And I did, I scratched her. And they left there, and the winning color was about 5 in front. I said, "Boy, you're a smart son of a gun." And we were able to run her down
That was amazing.
and to win. But that was kind of talking about picking your spots.
Yeah.
You know, we sort of backed up from a mile and 1/8 to a mile. But she was able to overcome that. When you pull the trigger on her, when Randy pulled the trigger on her, she was there.
Yeah.
And as you say, that made it a lot easier.
Nick, I'm curious, in your career, you've had obviously so many great horses. When they start getting on a roll like that, when they start racking up wins, do you start getting nervous about, do you start trying to pick those spots, or do you just go out, I want to see where the horse runs, I have its game plan, and this is what we're going to stick to?
Well, the good thing about it, believe it or not, when you have a horse like that, you see the race in the book, like the Whitney, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. So, commentator will talk about him, he just passed, so he's got that particular date is the Whitney, and that race is going to go. Mm-hmm. So if you're planning something before that, you can see maybe something, but the main thing is you're zeroed in on the race. Mm-hmm. I think that's a big thing in training horses when you have a lot of good horses. Mm-hmm. They know, you know the spot, and if you know how to train, like obviously who's next to us, I think it's very, very good for a trainer that's in that position to have that great horse at that time.
Yeah.
I don't, for a commentator, sounds crazy, but he almost won 3 Whitneys.
Yeah, he did.
And the last time you look at that, and I love what Shug said, it made me really feel he always knows what to say. You think about it, he said the Whitney is a special race, right? Yeah. There's only 2 horses besides commentator that won the Whitney twice. One is Kelso, one is Discovery. It's pretty good company. Yeah. So at the end of the day, those races are important, but I think they're in front of you, especially the breezes. If the breeze is good, if you have good people, you always try to have good people working for you. That's a big edge too. Absolutely. And I remember when he breezed, it was lights out, so you said, okay, he's going to be tough to beat. Yeah. And he did. And then the first one, he beat the horse of the year, St. Leon. Yeah. I like what, I got to say, that's funny. I never knew that shit that you scratched Cadillacing. I never knew that. Jesus, I don't mind it.
Well,
the horse was going to be in front. That was unbelievable.
Like what I was saying, I don't know whether that was Lucas or Cadero. He might have said, I don't know whether I want, because he was close with Lucas too, so he might have been thinking, I don't want to get involved in all this. He wouldn't have been gotten involved, but because he wouldn't want to be involved in everything. But
that's great. Yeah. I'm interested in something we saw this year. Bill Mott win the Kentucky Derby with Sovereignty. Obviously, won a couple years ago with Country House by disqualification. But you could tell how much it meant to him to have a horse cross the wire first. And this was after a Hall of Fame career. And I'm interested, kind of transitioning to talk a little bit about Orr, but you had already been inducted in the Hall of Fame, had a legendary career. What did it mean to have Orb come along and that run to winning the Kentucky Derby?
Well, the Kentucky Derby was a race that I think 99.9% of us dreamed to win. Mm-hmm. And to have that opportunity and to be able to bring him through his 3-year-old year, he won to get back. He broke his maiden Thanksgiving weekend at Aqueduct. I remember walking through the parking lot by myself, going back to the bar, and said, what are you going to do with him now? Because he wanted to run a distance of ground, but I didn't think Gulfstream was going to suit him. Being speed was favorite track, but of course the book comes out at the end of January. There was a race going 2 turns, and that was a logical place for us to go, and so we went. my training style says go into 2 other than, but there wasn't gonna be a 2 other than, so then we went to the Fountain of Youth and, you know, won that, and then you know, Nick knows the show's on, and it was a bit of a nerve-wracking time, but I'd gone to school a lot of times, using Nick's verbiage there, and so, you know, I was excited, you know, to have this opportunity, and the thing about it is everything went right. All winter, we wanted to breeze, we breezed. It wasn't raining, he was at Payson Park. And we wanted to, whatever we wanted to do, it all, you know, when we ran, it all went fine. You know, there wasn't a matter of sloppy track, what are we gonna do now, and this and that. I mean, he won the Derby on off track, but, you know, as Nick knows, it's an exciting time, and, you know, I'd sure like to have the opportunity to go through the motions, especially again with the horse that's, I think's got a good chance.
You know, Shug mentioned a couple times everything went right.
Yeah.
And was that kind of your experience with some of those big races where it just seemed like the stars aligned sometimes?
That particular race, there isn't anything that could go wrong. You have to have 21 days of perfect training.
Yeah.
You have one little, you know, hiccup, very hard to, you know, you have to be real lucky, put it that way. I had an icebox. I remember he had a little something, I don't know what it was. It was like his temperature, you know, you take the temperatures every morning. It was like 101 one day. You know, he said, oh man, you know, but then took him to the track and I said, well, we got to figure out. And took it later in the afternoon, he was 99, you know, and changed. But if it went wrong,
yeah,
he knows, Shug knows, you kind of, things have to go just right. Like he said, there was, you know, you don't have to worry about the track, you don't have to worry about this, and it all went good. But in my opinion, that's for sure. You have to have perfect days.
Yeah.
If you have one miscut, it's very hard to
Catch up.
So we're up here obviously in Saratoga, and one of my favorite races to watch every once in a while when I go down a YouTube rabbit hole is Honor Code's maiden victory, because it came out of 22 lengths back at one point and then wins easy. Did you have any idea he was sitting on that Everton debut, and kind of what did that tell you right away about how special he could potentially be?
Well, he had trained good.
Yeah.
And I'd waited for that race going 7/8. You know, Johnny had worked him a time or two, and but when they were going down the backside, when he was that far back, I was trying to think of an excuse. You know, what am I going to tell these people? You know, then here he came, and you know, he was definitely a special horse, but he was not the soundest in the world. You know, so you had to kind of work around him a little bit, but. You know, when you took him over there, he gave it to you.
The showdown in the Whitney with Liam's map as well. And I was just watching the interview you gave after that race with Richie Migliori, where you said at the 16th pole, I kind of looked down and thought, well, I was going to get second. You know, I didn't think he was going to get there. I mean, it's one of those races you watch over and over again. You just don't know how he puts on that final run. And just an incredible effort there that day.
Well, it was, but, you know, that was all him. Wasn't anything I did. You know, he was able to finish really strong and to win, and it was a big thrill for us and for his partners, being, you know, the Farishes and a guy named Joe Hudson's toast of the town guy, and probably some others. But it was a fun day. It was, you know, obviously it was the last part of it was a bit of a nerve-wracking race, but like I say, it was fun, and you know, it's a race we all kind of think back on. And a guy that was my assistant for a long time named Robbie Medina, he was really close to Honor Code, and so he still comes up. I mean, they sold an AP Honor or whatever to Keeneland last week, and he's calling me up telling me the horse is spitting image to Honor Code, and said, you ought to find somebody to buy him. I said, I ain't got anybody to buy him. You know, it was a special. He was a special horse, and he was fun to kind of be around the barn because people did like him.
You know, it's interesting. Before we started recording, I told you how much I loved a filly you had, Kathleen O. And throughout your career, it seems like you've had some of these horses. I don't want to call them all push button, but it does seem like they just have that burst. How is that something you train into them, or just something they have, and then you kind of try to train around that in some ways?
Well, I think, Nick and I both will tell you that, the biggest thing to do when you're breezing them and training them is you want them to finish. They're going off too quick, they're not gonna finish as good, and I don't care whether it's in the morning or the afternoon. It's not quite as easy today because speed is such an emphasis. And, a lot of these guys have got a lot of horses, and so they're able to train them to be fast. And, but I think the biggest thing is to get them, is in their breezes, you want them to finish. We 2-min lick them some, which is 15 to the 8th, just trying to build up stamina a little bit, maybe in between breezes some, and, but that also help them finish some.
You and Shug have a reputation of taking your time with horses and not rushing things along. And, sometimes you have some precocious horses in the barn, certainly, but where did that come from? But do you think that's being lost at all?
It's being lost today, I think, because the resolve today, it's instant gratification. I think Shug brought out a great point with Mr. Phipps, the way he conduct his business, and personally they would all intertwine with training the horse. So you have to basically look at the horse and say, look, this is a chance for a horse to be really good. Let me take my time with him, because let me be careful with him. Let me wait for the light bulb to go off. Today, everything's the instant thing, and they want the horse to go. What's the matter? He's not running. He's not running. Well, Woody Stevens, he's from Kentucky too. These guys have great lines. Shug's got a great. If you ever hang around Shug, he's got some great lines. Woody told me once. He goes, Nick, if you don't wait on them, they'll make you wait. That's a good line. That means, if you don't look at that horse and see what that horse is, you're going to get yourself. And today they have so many horses. So, look, that's the game. I'm still grateful. I'm grateful today for this opportunity of this guy next to us. But at the end of the day, it's a whole different game.
Yeah.
But Shug, as you can see, he's not changing his ways. He's training that horse. They don't like it. Well, then you have to go to the slick talking guys. You have to go to, somebody that's going to, giddy up them or do something like that. But if you get a chance, one thing we're always proud of, I don't know how many derbies we're in. Whoever they are will tell you. Bill Parcells will tell you, the great coaches say, you have to have the players. That's for sure. And then when you get the players, you better know what you're doing with them. And obviously, that's the key.
Yeah.
But I think that's what, because he could follow up on that if he wants.
I think one of the things is that they, the people today are a little more anxious than.
Yeah.
I told Mr. Phipps' horse needs some time. That was the end of the story. I told Mr. Phipps this horse got hurt today, and we're going to have to put him away for a while. But you never heard about him again until he was on the overnight. It was never a question of, well, what are we going to do? Why did this happen? This and that. And I just see with the people today, a lot of them are a lot more anxious to get them. And I've had some that have said to me, why is it taking so long to get the horse to the races? It's, well, you got to get a bottom in them to get them there. And if they come to you and they don't have a good solid bottom in them, it's going to take you a little bit more time to get them there. And training 2-year-olds a day is different for me than it was training them, a while back. If you look back, I had a lot of 2-year-old winners early, but I don't have nearly as many now. But I think that a little bit of it is because of where the horses came from in the earlier days. That when they came to me, they had a really, really good bottom in them. They knew about the gait. I remember Lure girl Lena got on him, and she said every time I take him over to the gate, he broke his maiden in May, I think, and I take him to the gate, he sticks his head right in the V of the gate, so he knew what the gate was for, when it opened, he was gone. And he was an extremely fast horse, and you know, as we went down the line a little bit later on, you know, some of the horses weren't bred to be quite as fast, but that was one of the things that I got lucky with when I went to the Phippses. They'd had gotten off of Pronto and for, you know, some of these long-winded things, and I had Danzigs and Mr. Prospectors and even Private Account, you know, and those horses were quicker, and you know, so you know, when we ran them, they were ready to run. Some of the times a day, you know, I think you have to practice a little bit.
Final question for both of you. Thank you again for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. But you still have so many great horses in your barn right now. We just saw Integration run recently, Fort Washington, a bunch of great horses. I'm curious, what keeps you motivated every morning after all these years in the game and all the accomplishments that you've had?
I still like to do it. And you know, I mean, it's, you know, as Nick and I both touched on, it's entirely different now than it was when we were coming up and coming to Saratoga and going to Florida and going in Belmont Park. I mean, anybody asked me, so where would you rather train in any place? Belmont Park, right on the tip of my, you know, now we haven't trained in Belmont Park. It's going to be 3 years. And it's taken a little bit of the light away from me because I would look forward to April the 1st when Belmont Park main track over, well, I can get up there. You know, now, this year we didn't come till 20th of April or something. Maybe I'm kind of waiting around a little bit to see what happens with the new Belmont. You know, maybe it'll put me back in my comfort zone. And, you know, I mean, even if you look up here, you know, I don't think this time last year, I don't even think we'd shipped up here yet. You know, now we've had 3 open days. And I'm talking out of turn here a little bit, but that, you know, that are kind of administrative guys, and Nick will agree with me on this, are not guys that were around at that time. You know, I mean, there was a parking lot back here where we used to park our car every day. Now I got to park in some trees somewhere. And before COVID, I never went to the races here ever without a coat and tie, ever. And you know, unless I got one in the stake or something, you know, I don't, you know, I'll put it, maybe bring a sport coat along with me, but it's been so hot I haven't put it on. But you know, so I think that that's a lot of what keeps spurring me on. I mean, you know, to have the opportunity to take Integration over there, and I was going to go to Arlington Megan, and it's a race that you know, that I'd like to win, obviously. And you know, to see, you know, he just got beat in Florida, and he just got beat here, and Fort Washington belongs to a really good guy in Florida. He gets a big kick out of it. He'll get on JetBlue down there and fly up and watch him run, wherever it is, and you know, and then, you know, then there's some others around that don't care as much, but I do enjoy seeing the people that do care and do understand, enjoy what's, you know, what they see, and know how to take the good with the bad, because as we all know, it's, you know, if you win 20% of the time, me, Nick, some of these other guys know, but if you win 20% of the time, you know, you're doing pretty good.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, and then of course you always are hoping for, you know, another good one. You know, I mean, like I say, I would love to go through the exercise of getting the horse ready for the Derby again. It's the right horse, and taking a chance. You know, I mean, obviously you want to win, but if you're in it, you know, you've got a chance. I mean, I don't really care about taking one over at 50-1, but you know, if you take one over there that you think's got a big chance. I mean, when I took Code of Honor over there, I thought he had a big chance. You know, there was all that commotion in the race. You know, it was able for Country House to be put up. We were put up to second, but you know, that was on the racetrack that day when they put the inquiry sign up. The track was a little bit wet.
Yeah.
And so I remember my feet were cold. But I was gonna wait and see if they took his number down or not, which they did, and then deservedly so. But that's a lot of what pushes me along. And you know, I don't have the amount of 2-year-olds now that I used to have, but that's okay. I mean, you know, we worked a couple out of the gate this morning, and you always hope one of them's going to jump up and be a standout, and you never know.
Nick, same thing with you. You were saying, you know, just waiting for Citation to walk in through the
Yeah,
barn, you know, and that's what kind of keeps you going.
There's two things. So that's exactly right. I love, you know, the enthusiasm, which makes you get up in the morning, you know.
Yeah.
If I could get my hands on a few young horses, that would give me the energy I need, you know what I'm saying? I'm still happy. And then there's another thing too, is I love every one of them, but I don't think I could be a good bartender. So I just need to be in this game, you know what I mean? I love bartenders, but I need to stay in this game somehow. And the thing is to get the opportunity. I'm happy now because it looks like I'm getting a little better shot, you know, and you can see a little bit more, you know, because that's what it is. And when you know something since you're 16 years old, wherever you come from, and that's why I always loved Shug, because he always knew I'd come from New York, he comes to the great state of Kentucky. And it's a great thing, because that's what America's about. You know, you get a chance. And just hoping for the chance, and, you know, I love what he said too about hoping something, you know, comes along, you know. Shows you, like, it's in your blood, and no matter what he's done, he's won every race, but that I love. Yeah, I love that today. That makes me motivated. You know what I'm saying? To hear him talk that way, but I've seen him train, and you know, believe me, you could think whatever you want, ladies and gentlemen out there. I honestly believe what I said about him, and I'm telling you the truth. I can look in the camera. I love the way he trains horses. I watch him every morning. It's an art. You don't have that anymore. No offense to these guys. They're all good because they got stats. They got stats, and that's all they look for is stats. So I look for the whole thing. I look for, you know, looking at Shug's wife over there and stuff like that. These are people I grew up with, knowing they love the game, what the game's about. And that's what I hope we can never lose. And Shug, one thing about, I don't know why they make you park in the trees. I gotta tell you, I'll be honest with you, I must have a better spot than you. I don't know what to do. No, I know exactly what you're saying.
How you know you're hiding behind a tree all the time.
The good thing about the game is, years ago, we seen where it was like baseball, football, and basketball. They've got ahead of us, but you know, you can never take away from the terminology horse racing. The horse still has to get around there, and no matter how you look at it, it's still a great sport. And it's like he said, it's still a great 2 minutes in sports. You know, you have 2 minutes in sports, and all the other races are great, so it's a good thing. But guys like him have helped the game.
We got to reverse the form a little bit.
Yeah.
To make the game better.
There you go.
You know, when I look up and yesterday they ran a race for 12.5 at Saratoga on Sunday afternoon. I thought, my God.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, it's hard.
And it's opening weekend.
Yeah.
It's different if it's the last
For the third time.
Third opening.
Yeah, third opening weekend. You're right, you're correct, I'm sorry.
Favorite steakhouse in Louisville called Pat's. We're up there at the table and Nick's there. Nick's talking away. I got to look around, I said, you know, I won a couple of races round 2, you know. But I've always told that story about Nick. He was talking away, and in a good way. Got, you know, Woody was that way. If you're around Woody, you didn't talk. You know, Woody talked.
That's what I always say. I always say I sound like Woody. I said, let me sound like Woody, because you know what? Well, this fellow said to me one day at one of our restaurants, you know, whatever. He said, hey, did you ever win the champagne? And this sounds like Woody. I said, yeah, 5 times, which I did. And it was funny because then I kept talking. This one did this, this one did that, you know, just like he said.
But I was at some kind of gathering in Miami, and our Carol was there. That's how long ago it was. And our Carol had gone to the restroom, and he came back out. Woody had been in the restroom, and he said, I don't think I ever won a race. I think I did win some races. Woody was in there talking away. But he was not only was Woody Stevens a wonderful, wonderful trainer, but he was a hell of a guy.
Yeah.
He was too much.
The only thing I can say about Shug is we always had, like, believe it or not, it's a lot of fun. You know, like everybody says to me, oh, Shug, you know, look, he demands respect and he commands it because he earned it. He earned it. You know, I remember he was 1 horse, 2 horse, and he built himself up. And I know him a long, long time. He worked his ass off, you know, to get where he was. Yes, the Phippses came by, and he not only did he take advantage of it, he did unbelievable. So at the end of the day, but I seen the way he came up. I know. He worked for Frank Whiteley. I remember Fats Weissman gave him that program. He was an assistant, a foreman, whatever you were. From foreman, assistant, came up all the way. Just, you know, we just hit it off good. You know, I just respect him, you know. But I like it. A lot of people don't know. He's funny. He has a personality. You just got to know him, you know. So I'm grateful, and I can't thank you enough, Shug, for doing this for me.
Oh, honestly, anything.